This year, a lot of uncertainty in the first half of the year, macro uncertainty, and that led to an impact on bookings and demand at United and across the whole industry. But it felt like there was a turning point at the end of June where the tax bill passed and the situation in the Middle East was calmer, and tariffs, while not certain yet, narrowing the range. And it really felt like people felt enough confidence or enough lower level of uncertainty that they kind of came off the sidelines and were unfrozen, and particularly for business demand. I mean, you can't stay on the sidelines forever, and that was enough of a trigger. And it really was like a light switch flipped at the end of June, particularly for business demand, double-digit acceleration in business demand as we ended June, and that's continued, through yesterday.
We've talked a lot about the K-shaped recovery and the idea that high-end consumers have really been driving the economy. Corporations kind of dropped off with business travel. As you said, they picked back up. What about the rest of the travelers, the main cabin? How much have they rebounded back to where they would have been had there not been some of the headline volatility? So
if you sort of separate it into those three pieces, business demand dropped off at the start of the year. That seems like it's bounced back to what we were expecting it to be as we moved into July. Premium and higher end leisure sort of stayed consistent throughout. It never really dropped off. And the biggest impact for the consumer was in low end leisure. And that's come back some in July, but not as much. I'd say that's sort of 50% recovered to what we were expecting at the start of the year. So business back to mostly a full recovery, and low end leisure kind of 50% recover. Premium leisure never fell off.
We've seen sort of one entrant into the CPI report. The idea of inflation has been airline tickets prices have been coming down. And there's this question of whether discounting is required to bring some of the main cabin back, and whether that's going to be a persistent trend, that competing on price is going to be really important. Now, how much do you see that as persisting into the second half of the year?
The airline industry is always a good value and always has attractive prices. But I think it's more of a supply-demand imbalance, that there are a number of airlines, there are two brand loyal airlines in the United States who are now generating the bulk of the industry's profits because those customers that care about quality, that care about service, that care about technology, we're just better, and they're choosing us. And you can see it in the data, you can see it in the numbers. For the more commoditized part of the business, there's simply more seats available. There's been more seats available than there is demand. But encouragingly, there's a big change coming in mid-August. While we've talked about demand, and I see an inflection in demand, there's also an inflection coming in supply. As by the time we get to mid-August, there are a lot of seats. Same thing happened last year. A lot of seats coming out of the industry, particularly from the low-end carriers who've been struggling. Those seats are coming out. So my guess is that's going to lead to a firmer pricing environment as we move into mid-August and beyond. Actually, we can already see that in our numbers for later in the year.
Are you expected to take any capacity out?
We continue to prune, but there's not going to be any structural changes to our capacity. And we are encouraged by the environment. And in fact, just in the last couple of weeks, for us at least, the yields have turned positive on domestic. They've been down, for several months as we started the year, but yields have now turned positive for forward bookings at least.
So why have you not gone with the more bullish potential estimates then for your forecast, given that you sound incredibly positive and you have seen this ongoing rebound?
Yeah, it's been a good year. I mean, it's actually pretty remarkable that we've grown earnings and margins for the first half of the year despite everything that's happened. But a lot has happened this year. And we like to have a policy of being conservative on our guidance because stuff does happen. And we want to be able to absorb some unexpected events in our guidance. So we intentionally build it conservatively. We do that all the time. So really what happened this time is we've been able to build that conservatism back. So, if nothing else happens this year, which is a big if, and if demand stays as strong, booking demand stays as strong as it is right now, there's probably upside. But we'd rather be conservative than get too far out over our skis.
One reason why I was really excited to speak with you is that you have a real-time view of not only the consumer and the appetite there, but also international demand, and whether there has been any damage to the brand Americana. The idea of foreign travelers coming to the United States for tourism, et cetera. You've said that there has been a drop-off in European travelers. How sustained do you expect that to be? Are you seeing any permanent shifts in that international inbound landscape?
There has been a drop-off in inbound demand. Europe is one, but it's a single-digit decline. So and U.S. point of sale has more than made up for it, and it's 80% of our business. I don't think it'll be permanent. The United States is the greatest country on earth. It's a great place for people to come, a great place for people to visit. Demand is affected by all kinds of things. We have fewer students coming to the U.S. right now, not surprisingly. That's a big part.
Fewer?
Quite a bit fewer. I mean, enough. It's a relatively small percentage of the business, but when you're talking about 1%, 2%, 3% changes in demand, you can see it when you're talking about small changes. But my guess is that we will get back to normal. And people's desire to travel, see the world, whether you're an American or a European or a Canadian, is strong. This is a great place to visit, and my guess is it'll get back to normal.
And if you're a senior and you're applying to colleges right now in the U.S., you probably are in pretty good shape. That's all I can say. There's also a question about the further uncertainty, and tariffs are almost a certainty at this point. How do you expect to absorb them? Are you planning, or do you have a base case for whether you'll increase prices or whether it will just hit margins more significantly?
For United, we're fortunate that most of our aircraft come from Boeing, so here in the U.S., and even the Airbus deliveries we have are mostly produced here in the United States. So tariffs don't have as big of a direct impact on us as they do perhaps on our competitors. The bigger issue for us is the impact that it has on the macroeconomy. And I feel really good. You were right earlier. You said we have a real-time indication of the economy. We're a very good real-time indicator of what's going on with the economy. Not always advanced, but good real-time. And it really does feel like something changed at the end of June. The level of confidence, at least less uncertainty. People are moving forward. And I think on tariffs, there's a narrower range of outcomes. Like, probably not going to be 145% on China. There's a narrower range of outcomes, and people have had 6 months to sort of figure out how to deal with it and have some contingency planning. Whatever the reasons are, it does feel like there's more certainty.
With Boeing, do you expect the deliveries to be on time, or do you expect there to be more competition with all the other countries that are making deals to buy Boeing planes?
That'll be an interesting point of what happens with tariffs. My guess is aviation ultimately will wind up excluded. It's the one industry. U.S. exports 6 times more aviation products than we import, so we have a big trade surplus on that side. So my guess is those will wind up excluded. But Boeing, is back on track. Narrow bodies are actually ahead of schedule for us. Wide bodies are still behind. I think that's less a Boeing issue, probably more an engine issue and the supply chain for engines. I think that's a longer term, multi-year challenge to get the wide body back on track. But Boeing seems to have turned the corner on production.
I just want to finish on Newark and whether Newark's turned the corner. I do know that we could go for an hour about the delays and some of the drama around that airport. You guys have a huge presence there. You have made this partnership with JetBlue and moved to JFK. Do you expect to expand more in the tri-state area to try to diversify your presence away from Newark?
Well, first, I'm really pleased with what Secretary Duffy and the Department of Transportation and FAA have done at Newark. My entire career here at United have been trying to get Newark on an equal footing with LaGuardia and JFK. That's essentially putting slot controls. Have the number of flights at the airport equal to the capacity of the airport. And we've finally done that. And you can already see the results. In June, Newark was the most reliable of the 3 New York area airports. And the future looks really good. So we feel really good about Newark, and it's a crown jewel, and we're going to grow it. And it's always going to be a crown jewel for United. But from the first day I got here to United, I've wanted us to get back into JFK. Our goal is to be the premier flag carrier of the United States, and we need to be in JFK to do that. So the JetBlue partnership is a great way for us to have a partner who has the same sort of culture on DNA for customers to get back, and have a presence on both sides of the river.